The public is fed a consistent narrative of kinetic threat. Legacy media highlights assets like Greenland as vital for missile defense, a 20th century framework for a 21st century battle space. This is a deliberate misdirection. The vector of a near-peer conflict will not be announced by sirens. The primary attack will be silent. It will target the two pillars of Western strategic overmatch: undersea data cables and low Earth orbit satellites. As detailed in CSIS and RUSI analyses, the global financial system and military command and control architecture run on a network of hyper-concentrated, physically vulnerable fiber optic lines. The objective is not to sink a carrier. It is to induce a systemic solvency crisis. By severing data and blinding satellites, an adversary renders the world's most expensive military apparatus a blind leviathan, a trillion-dollar asset, deaf to commands and unable to target, yet with its launch-on-warning protocols still active. The kinetic cost is negligible. The result is systemic paralysis. A superpower does not initiate a kinetic exchange from a position of strength. It does so from a position of weakness. The motive is not conquest, it is survival. We are witnessing a global solvency crisis, where a nation's ability to project conventional power is collapsing under its own weight. This isn't a mistake, it's a mathematical certainty. The war in Ukraine is the blueprint. Western media frames it as a geopolitical gambit. The financial data frames it as an act of desperation. According to analysis from RUSI, Russia's stagnant economy and demographic decline created a closing window of opportunity. The high-cost conventional military became a domestic liability, an asset burning cash the state did not have. An unpopular, high-cost war triggers capital flight. As Forbes analysis confirms, financial markets consistently bet against prolonged conventional conflict. Every billion-dollar tank destroyed by a $1,000 drone is not just a tactical loss. It's a downgrade to the nation's credit rating. The state is forced to liquidate its most expensive assets on the battlefield, accelerating the solvency crisis. When the initial high-cost kinetic shock fails, weakness forces a pivot. The doctrinal shift to mass drone warfare, documented by the Small Wars Journal, is not a sign of innovation. It is a symptom of systemic failure. Unable to afford the kinetic cost of a peer-to-peer conflict, the state is forced to adopt the asymmetric tactics of an insurgency. This is the last available lever before the strategic nuclear option. The central pillar of conventional deterrence is facing a systemic solvency crisis. The math is irrefutable. According to analysts at RUSI, the kinetic cost-exchange ratio has inverted. A single commercially available FPV drone costing approximately $500 can achieve a mission kill on a $5 million main battle tank. That is a 10,000 to 1 cost imbalance. This is not warfare. It is an economic liquidation protocol executed on the battlefield. Your adversary is no longer targeting your military. They are targeting your treasury's balance sheet. This radical cost disparity is the engine behind a phenomenon strategic planners call the democratization of violence. The barrier to entry for delivering precision, high lethality effects has collapsed. State-level military dominance, built on decades of research and billions in capital expenditure, can now be challenged by non-state actors or second-tier powers using off-the-shelf technology. The capacity for asymmetric destruction is no longer exclusive. It is open source. Consequently, a superpower's most expensive assets become its greatest liabilities. Each billion-dollar destroyer, each fifth-generation fighter jet, is no longer a projection of power, but a high-value, easily targeted liability on a national balance sheet. The documented use of drone warfare in theaters like Ukraine serves as a blueprint. A strategy of attrition against these high-cost platforms creates an unsustainable economic drain, triggering a solvency crisis not just for a military campaign, but for the state itself. The goal is to make conventional warfare economically impossible for the superior power. This economic vulnerability is the mechanism that removes the intermediate rungs from the escalation ladder. When a conventional response means certain economic ruin, and your high-cost assets are rendered impotent by low-cost threats like the AI-driven swarms DIU is racing to develop, the menu of options shrinks. The vector from a limited kinetic exchange to a strategic nuclear ultimatum becomes direct and mathematically predictable. This isn't a failure of policy. It's a feature of the new brutal economics of lethality. The regional instability you are being shown, warnings about South Africa, unrest in Canada, is misdirection. These are not root causes. They are systemic symptoms. These regions are being activated as gray zone laboratories. They are the designated arenas where the financial and kinetic cost of 21st century conflict is being tested, refined, and prepared for staging against primary targets. This is not chaos. It is a clinical trial for a new vector of warfare. The blueprint for this model is not theoretical. According to Small Wars Journal, the drone warfare in Ukraine provides a direct window into these new doctrinal concepts. It's a live-fire demonstration of how low-cost, attritable systems can neutralize high-cost conventional assets. In response, the Pentagon's Defense Innovation Unit has offered $100 million in prizes for an AI-enabled drone swarm orchestrator. This is not innovation. It is a panicked reaction to a solvency crisis in conventional deterrence. This new battle space invalidates geography as a defensive moat. The push to assert security interests in Greenland, noted as critical for missile defense, is a direct admission of this. When your forward-deployed, multi-trillion-dollar military becomes a liability, the only remaining strategy is homeland defense from new attack vectors. RUSI analysis confirms that control of Arctic transit routes becomes a zero-sum game when conventional naval projection is no longer guaranteed. The financial markets have already priced in this reality. The math does not lie. When the Trump administration signaled a potential kinetic exchange with Iran, oil prices, the classic indicator of major conflict, unexpectedly dropped. Forbes documented this anomaly. The market did not bet on a conventional war because it understood the exchange would be asymmetric, limited, and devastatingly efficient. It priced in a swarm, not an invasion. The solvency of modern war is now calculated by algorithms, not generals. Therefore, the next phase of this strategy, as indicated by CSIS threat models, is the migration of the proxy laboratory from regions like Ukraine into the domestic infrastructure of Western powers. The objective is not conquest, but to create a state of permanent, low-grade emergency. These are deniable asymmetric attacks on critical infrastructure, testing responses, mapping vulnerabilities, and confirming that the escalation ladder from a local power outage to a strategic ultimatum is now terrifyingly short. The core protocol is designated launch on warning. According to strategic frameworks published by RUSI, the decision cycle for a retaliatory nuclear strike is compressed to minutes. There is no time to wait for impact confirmation. The launch command is given based on validated sensor data indicating an inbound attack. This entire system of deterrence hinges on the integrity of that data, sourced from critical assets like the missile defense installations noted in Greenland. Now inject the fog of digital war. A sophisticated cyber attack, or a low-cost kinetic swarm, blinds the primary early warning radar. The screen goes black. The commander is now operating with zero visibility. The critical question is no longer, are we under attack? But is the loss of signal the attack itself? The protocol compels a decision based on incomplete data. Out of a systemic fear of a decapitation strike, the commander is mathematically forced toward a single option: launch. The system's logic makes escalation the default, not the exception. The next phase is not a declaration of war. It is a mathematical audit of a nation's solvency. The Pentagon's Defense Innovation Unit has already publicized the blueprint, offering $100 million for an AI-driven drone swarm orchestrator. This is not a research project. It is a procurement order for a weapon that makes aircraft carriers a balance sheet liability. Analysts at CSS and RUSI confirm that the core doctrine, refined in theaters like Ukraine, is not attrition. It is the application of overwhelming, low-cost kinetic force to create a systemic paralysis. The objective is not to sink a fleet, but to demonstrate the capability to do so at a cost that makes defense fiscally impossible. This is economic warfare executed through a kinetic vector. The calibration shot will not target a city. It will target a nerve center, a location deemed vital to national security, such as the missile defense and strategic warning apparatus in Greenland. An asset so critical its temporary failure removes the buffer for nuclear decision-making, forcing a direct choice between de-escalation and a launch-on-warning protocol. Within 12 months, expect a sudden, multi-hour power and communications blackout at a Tier 1 STRATCOM node like Thule Air Base. There will be no explosion, no casualties. The official explanation will be a cascading technical failure or an unprecedented solar flare. The markets, however, will register a ghost signal, an anomalous momentary spike in volatility indices that a state actor cannot trigger, but a non-state proxy can. It will be the quietest ultimatum in history, an attribution impossible event designed to prove the solvency crisis is here.